All elves of your kind are born with an innate control over the weave. Some are able to conjure the elements and control them at will, others can harden their bodies, making them efficient warriors. Some can even influence the minds of others using only their voice. And you got fucking True Strike. Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing, I guess, no, it's not really a build request. I mean, it kind of is a build request. Somebody kind of mentioned offhandedly in a comment that, hey, this one Mind Flayer power, that being Concentrated Blast, I'll have an infographic on screen now, basically works interestingly with True Strike, and it's basically a free way to get that off, especially if you combine it with the Zephysk power to use your Mind Flayer powers as a bonus action. I thought, well, yeah, but you could just cast any other concentration spell, and it would be more useful. But then that got me thinking, is there a way to actually make True Strike useful? I found it, and it is way more effective than anything I could have thought of. So this is kind of a combo build, but also I've kind of turned this into a character build, as you'll see as we get towards the end. I've kind of made a cowboy character here, quote unquote, but this is a man who is so miserable that he was born with True Strike that he has turned to alcoholism, and as such we are going to be using some equipment that works while drunk as well. So this is kind of a True Strike drunken cowboy type mix. It's a weird one, but I think it's actually a really interesting character because in the end, True Strike actually makes this build kind of strong. Don't get me wrong, not as strong as some other options would be, but I think it has an interesting, unique synergy with a certain playstyle that is going to be very, very cool to show off, and it has some unique synergies with some equipment that I don't even think Larian anticipated, because it's kind of bugged. Let's get into the build. So, first off, you can kind of choose what you want here, but I'm personally going to go with Rogue. You can go Rogue or Fighter first, but I'm personally going with Rogue because I want the skill proficiencies, but we are going to be taking a Fighter dip right quick. So, with this, your stats are going to look a bit strange here. We only really need Dexterity and Constitution to make this build work. Anything else is just a bonus. So I've put some points into Charisma here so we can be better in dialogue, some points into Wisdom for some saving throws, and some points into Strength for, I don't know, jumping and such. There's not really too much interesting here. This is a pretty standard Dex Rogue build. The only thing we're really dumping is Intelligence, because I feel like we need that the least for this build, because True Strike, even though it's technically cast with our Intelligence, doesn't actually require it in any simple way. And for those of you that don't know, True Strike, at the cost of an action, lets you gain advantage on your next attack roll, and it lasts for 2 turns. This is quite commonly known as, both in D&D and in Baldur's Gate 3, to be the worst cantrip in the game by a country mile. However, there is a way to use it. Like I said, we'll be getting into it. As for our skill proficiencies, I've chosen the Urchin background for Sleight of Hand and Stealth because this man has been shunned by Elven society, and therefore, just for having True Strike. And there was no way of hiding it, because if you can just see here, he's got heterochromia with his True Strike eye, which is the same colour as the cantrip icon, which I thought was kind of cool. But anyway, we have Sleight of Hand and Stealth, but also Perception, because our True Strike eye lets us see a bit better. And Deception, Intimidation, and Persuasion also works. If you feel like you actually want to lean more into that True Strike eye and go for a Perception expertise and maybe put some more points into Wisdom than Charisma, you could absolutely do that. That might be quite fun as a character kind of building thing, but these are the stats I've chosen for now anyway, but it's entirely up to you. Right, at level 2, we're going to be taking a quick multi-class jump, but you can take this really whenever you like, it really doesn't matter, but you're probably going to want to get it around the same time you get your first feat, and you'll see why. So we're going to be doing our quick jump over to Fighter, specifically for the fighting style of archery, to add a +2 to our ranged weapon attacks. That's literally all we want from here, there's nothing else to really talk about, we just need this to offset something that we're going to get in a minute. Right, so we're going to go straight back over to Rogue. This is going to get us Cunning Action Hide, Dash, and Disengage, allowing us to do these things as a bonus action. Next up at Rogue level 3, we're obviously taking the Thief class. This is going to give us an additional bonus action, meaning that now our regular action is a little bit less important, especially if we're dual-wielding crossbows. I think you're starting to see where I'm going with this, but keep with me, because it gets more interesting. But of course, now that we have 2 bonus actions, it means we can use our action for True Strike, and then have 2 bonus actions to do whatever we need to do. Next up at Rogue level 4, we're going to be able to get our first feat, and you absolutely saw this coming. We are grabbing Sharpshooter. Your ranged weapon attacks do not receive penalties from high ground rules. Ranged weapon attacks with weapons you are proficient with have a -5 penalty to their attack roll, but deal an additional 10 damage. With the archery fighting style, we've offset this -5 penalty a little bit, but we will be able to offset it even further, and actually completely as well. But let's get into the rest of the build before we get to that. Next up, with Rogue level 5, we're going to be grabbing Uncanny Dodge. This lets us use our lightning quick reflexes to protect ourselves. At Rogue level 6, we're also going to be grabbing some skill expertise, and you can put these into whatever you really like, it doesn't matter. I quite like Persuasion and Sleight of Hand for pickpocketing and persuasion and being able to persuade people, but it's entirely up to you. Next up at Rogue level 7, we're going to be getting Evasion, meaning that we have a better chance of surviving dexterity-based saving throws, meaning we take half damage on a failure and no damage on a success. Next up at Rogue level 8, we're going to be grabbing another feat, and this means we can grab an ability score improvement to bump up our dexterity, therefore bumping up the damage of our crossbows and our sneak attacks. Next up with Rogue level 9, we are going to be getting our level 9 feature, Supreme Sneak. Now, the other Rogue video I made this week, the Assassin's Creed build, the Soaring Assassin, basically kind of poked fun at how, like, Thief gets a better thing than Assassin, and this is true. You blend into the environment so completely that you become invisible. So where, you know, Assassin gets a level 1 spell in Disguise Self, Thief gets a level 2 spell in Invisible, which admittedly, not so much better, but still works for this strategy, so we definitely want to pick it up. At Rogue level 10, we're going to be grabbing a bonus feat that I just learned existed. So we're going to be grabbing another ability score improvement to bump our dexterity all the way to the maximum of 20. And finally, with Rogue level 11, we're going to be getting our final sneak attack damage buff. It is now at its maximum possible damage, a flat 100 health, which is very satisfying, and also reliable talent. With any ability check with a skill you are proficient in, the lowest result you can roll on the die is a 10. Very, very useful. And that is the build. Very, very quick, but we're building just a straight rogue here for one specific reason, and that is to get the maximum amount of damage on our sneak attack ranged. But why do we care about this so much? Well, sneak attack can trigger whenever you have advantage on a foe, which True Strike grants. Now, there is an obvious caveat to this. Both True Strike and sneak attack require an action to use. So the way you would play this off is you would kind of have to rotate True Strike in and out. Basically what you can do is the fun facts about True Strike, right? It doesn't actually make an enemy hostile. So if you are about to get into combat with somebody and you cast True Strike on them ahead of time, you can immediately use your sneak attack guaranteed no matter what. That is your combat opener. Then you would fire 2 offhand crossbow bolts with your bonus action using Sharpshooter to get a ton of damage, yada yada yada. But also Sharpshooter gets offset by True Strike, but that's another thing entirely. But also then, on your next turn, you make 2 bonus action attacks, and then you cast True Strike afterwards, meaning your next turn can be a sneak attack and 2 crossbow shots, and then True Strike again the next round, and so on and so forth. So you're rotating True Strike in and out to basically always guarantee you're going to get a sneak attack every other round, while still doing tons of damage with your crossbows and your bonus actions. But that's not all that True Strike is capable of, and this is where it's going to get a little bit funky. True Strike makes Crossbow Expert somewhat irrelevant, and I'll explain why. So with Crossbow Expert, okay, it makes it so that you no longer take disadvantage when you're up close to an enemy. Well, advantage and disadvantage cancel each other out in this game, so if you have True Strike on an enemy, you can actually fire your crossbow bolts at range. So if there's no way to disengage and get away from an enemy for you, you can just cast True Strike and still get 2 shots off without a penalty. It becomes neutral. So that is another use of True Strike. But now with the equipment we have, there is even more uses of True Strike to go through. Let me show you. So, first off, we have the Marksmanship Hat. This is going to give us a +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls, which for us is pretty good. That's going to help offset sharpshooter. Oh, I've done it again. People pointed out in the comments that last time I did this build, I kept calling it sharpshooter. Sharpshooter, which is also a cowboy hat, so we're getting that cowboy look, which is awesome. No cloak particularly for fashion, but if you want something, since we're going to be like, you know, playing a rogue, for Shade Slayer cloak that you can get in Act 3 does work quite nicely, because while you're hiding, the number you need to roll a critical hit is reduced by 1, which could mean more high damage numbers. But again, not a huge fan of it fashion-wise for this type of build, so I've decided to leave it out, but I'm just pointing out that the option is there. Our armor is the Elegant Studded Leather, a +2 bonus to initiative rolls, advantage on stealth checks, which is everything a rogue loves, but you obtain, and also the ability to cast shield once per long rest, and it has a decent amount of armor class. Not necessary to the build, but obviously very, very helpful to grab, but obviously it's only available in Act 3, so until then you can use the Studded Leather Armor +1, which you obtain in Act 1 by completing a certain questline, and it's just a decent piece of armor that looks quite good overall, but I quite like getting the Elegant Studded Leather in Act 3, and you can get it quite easily. Next up, now you have some options for gloves. And they all interact with this build in a very interesting way. I'll get the most boring version out the way first. The Legacy of the Masters. This one I don't quite like fashion-wise because you cannot get the colour to match the rest of the outfit, but honestly play around with this concept. But what this is going to do is give you a +2 bonus to your attack and damage rolls with weapons, meaning that with the Legacy of the Masters, the archery fighting style, and the Marksmanship Hat, you have completely offset the sharpshooter negative bonus, meaning that you're going to be able to get those hits off way more often. You can obtain these in Act 3, and in fact all of these gloves can only be obtained in Act 3. However, if you do want a early game alternative, the Act 1 gloves, the Gloves of Archery, which I will include a link to in the description, do nothing really other than give you proficiency in longbows and shortbows, and also enable you to not enable you to, they just give you a +2 bonus on every ranged weapon attack. So, I mean, that's pretty good, especially for Act 1. It's definitely a solid option to get you through the game until you get these gloves. So, the Legacy of the Masters can be used to offset Sharpshooter, but let's get into the more interesting ones. These are the Quick Spell gloves. Cantrips that cost an action cost a bonus action instead once per short rest. So, if you wanted to set up a particularly powerful round of damage and get maybe a couple of sneak attacks off quickly at the start of combat, you can use the Quick Spell gloves to cast True Strike as a bonus action, meaning that you can spend one bonus action, get a sneak attack, and get a bonus action attack off all in one round, and then also then get into that True Strike cycle next turn, and that can be done after doing the Battle Preemptive True Strike, where you cast True Strike before engaging in combat. So, lots of True Strikes, lots of sneaking around, lots of high damage sneak attacks. Pretty good. But the one that interests me the most is the Gemini gloves. Cantrips targeting foes and allies can target an additional creature. The same target can be chosen twice. Now, normally, this would be used for things like Firebolt, Ray of Frost, maybe even Shocking Grasp. However, it has a unique interaction with True Strike that, again, I don't think Larian intended, because it's kind of bugged. Cantrips targeting foes and allies can target an additional creature. The same target can be chosen twice. Cantrips require targets to be closer together unless those cantrips are projectiles. Now, you can do this once per short rest. But how this interacts with True Strike is really, really interesting. So, if you have two enemies that are close together, they will both have the True Strike condition. Now, the way I thought it would work is because True Strike ends when you attack the foe, I thought that once I attacked one enemy, True Strike would be gone on both. This is not the case. You attack basically how it works is you target an enemy with True Strike, and if there's a second enemy near them in that radius, that enemy will also get True Strike. However, if you attack the enemy that you actually targeted with True Strike, not the additional target, that target will lose count True Strike, yes, but the additional target will not. And the cool thing is, it will not lose True Strike even if you attack them as well. So they will actually have True Strike on them for 2 whole turns, meaning that with these gloves and our dual-wielding crossbow strategy, you can cast True Strike and then be able to attack one enemy with True Strike once and then another enemy with True Strike twice, allowing you to get a ton of damage off because again, with being able to have advantage all the time, you're going to get crits a lot, and it's going to work beautifully. Obviously it's a bugged interaction. It really should take True Strike away when you attack the additional enemy as soon as you attack them the first time, but I'm just going to say, this ain't one I'm reporting to Larian. So it's actually a really, really unique interaction. You'll see it in the combat showcase where I targeted the tutorial boss. The Mind Flayer next to him also got targeted, and I was able to attack the Mind Flayer with advantage from True Strike twice. Super, super interesting little unique interaction that I was able to discover, and I'm really, really happy it exists. But let's get into the second part of this character, like, build type deal. Because obviously, as I said at the start of the video, having True Strike as part of your innate being is so depressing that you turn to alcoholism. So let's look at the two kind of alcohol-based pieces of equipment that I've decided to go with. First up is the Amulet of the Drunkard. While wearing this amulet, you regain 2 to 8 hit points per turn while drunk. Additionally, increase the duration of your inebriation by 5 rounds. So just for being drunk, which will be your natural state of being, you will basically be healed every round, which is really, really nice. Also, we have the Punch Drunk Bastard Club. It's a two-handed club that, while you are drunk, you have advantage on attack rolls. Here's the kicker. This doesn't have to be attack rolls with this weapon. This is any attack roll you do, spells or ranged weapons. So you gain advantage on everything as long as you're drunk. Does this invalidate True Strike? Yes, as does everything else in the game. However, I feel like combining this with this kind of strategy as well is going to make you super, super strong. You also gain a little bit of extra thunder damage, but I think that only applies on the weapon attacks. Correct me if I'm wrong. So overall, with this kind of strategy, you can't, but here's the thing though, you can't get any of this drunk equipment until Act 3 anyway. So basically True Strike is a really good way of getting this similar effect until you get this equipment. And because we are a high half-elf and just get True Strike anyway as a free cantrip, we don't have to take any spellcaster levels and waste other levels to be able to get it, so, you know, it's pretty good. And obviously we are running the classic dual crossbow combo, this being the Hellfire Hand crossbow and the Near Misser, both obtainable in Act 2. Now, I've always used the Near Misser for my crossbow builds because to my mind, it is the most powerful crossbow other than the Hellfire Hand crossbow, but I actually was looking through the wiki, and apparently a hand crossbow +2 has been found. It is in a vault in Janeth's house in Act 3, meaning that you can now have 2 +2 crossbows, but considering that is also an Act 3 grab, I just wanted to include the Near Misser as always, because it is an Act 2 grab, and it gives you magic missile, so it's a bit better in my eyes. But overall, yeah, we also have a couple of rings. The Caustic Band just adds a little bit of extra acid damage. You can replace this with whatever. And the Strange Conduit Ring. While concentrating on a spell, the wearer's weapon attacks deal an additional 1 to 4 psychic damage. Now, I need to use a Yu-Gi-Oh analogy, which is a bit weird, but I'm a big Yu-Gi-Oh nerd. So the way the Strange Conduit Ring interacts with True Strike is a bit interesting, because you think, because when you hit the enemy, True Strike disengages, you think, oh, you might not actually get this because technically on the hits the concentration ends. No, you do actually get the Strange Conduit Ring damage because it's when you fire the attack and the bow and the arrow is in mid-air, that already has the psychic damage applied to it. So even though concentration ends when the creature is hit, they still get the extra psychic damage landed on them from the projectile. It's the same as in Yu-Gi-Oh, where if you destroy a card that already has its effects going off, it doesn't actually negate the effect. So it's kind of like, yes, technically you don't have concentration when this attack lands, but because you did have concentration when you launched it, it does work. So basically, it's a little bit of extra damage out of True Strike, is what I'm trying to say. That was a weird rant. I swear, this is my 4th video I've recorded today, and I think I am slowly going insane. Just a little bit. I don't think there's anything left to go over. I think, yeah, this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you make True Strike not bad. Oh, one more thing I forgot. We have the Boots of Apparent Death to be able to cast Feign Death. You drank so much alcohol that you passed out. That's what that is. Anyways, that is the build. Like I say, I mean, it's a bit clickbaity for me to say, I made True Strike good? Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, 1 exclamation mark. When really, this is just using one of the most powerful already existing builds in the game, that being 2 Crossbows Thief, to make True Strike seem like it's really being useful, when in reality, you could still do without it. Instead of True Strike, just grab extra attack. make 4 attacks per round, and you're basically doing a similar amount of damage. But the challenge was interesting. It was interesting to A, make a build that worked around True Strike that was actually effective, B, find the unique interactions that True Strike has with certain items, and 3, creating an interesting character. Like this half-elfin, character who got their cantrip from birth, whereas others got like Firebolt or Blade Ward or Friends or Mage Hand, and he gets True Strike and is as such shunned by the community, but it actually turns out to be quite powerful, giving him a Deadeye with ranged weapons, which Elves probably wouldn't normally use like that, especially not crossbows. I think is actually super, super interesting and a really fun character, like, development path that you can go down, and I think roleplay wise it is so interesting as a build. And again, you're not getting a bad build out of this package. This is still a really strong build. I mean, you'll see in the combat footage that is currently playing, but this build does still shred, and again, in the right circumstances, True Strike does actually do benefit. It benefits you, which I never thought I would be able to say. So I have to answer the big question. Is True Strike is True Strike is useless still going to be a meme on this channel? Fuck yeah, this shit sucks.